Se čuje sad?
Nisu te vode baš za mene, ja sad idem više.
Moraju svi ostali da čuju. Ako jedan čuje, moraju svi ostali.
Ako jedan čuje, to je to. Ako jedan čuje, svi ostali ne čuju, to je...
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning. I'm very happy to welcome you to this Judicial Reform Conference. Your Excellencies, dear Emanuele, dear Annika, dear President Vasovic, Minister Popovic, Deputy Chief Prosecutor Stamenkovic, representatives of the Council of Europe member and observer states, distinguished judges, prosecutors, representatives of civil society, the media, legal professionals, dear Christophe, coming from Strasbourg, dear friends. It's a great pleasure to greet you on behalf of the Secretary General of the Council of Europe, Maria Pacinovic-Buric, at the opening of the Judicial Reform Conference hosted by the Ministry of Justice and the joint European Union Council of Europe project Support for the Implementation of Judicial Reform in Serbia. The recent adoption of the new set of judicial and prosecutorial laws may represent an important step in the ongoing reform and a significant impetus in the context of the commitments made by the Republic of Serbia back when it decided to join the Council of Europe almost 20 years ago to the date in 2003, and when it embarked on the EU accession process. Dear colleagues, the way in which the judiciary's independence and autonomy is being redefined today shows that constitutional and legislative reform is possible to move towards Council of Europe standards. The joint project of the European Union and the Council of Europe, Support for the Implementation of Judicial Reform in Serbia, provided advice to the Ministry of Justice and the different working groups in the process of drafting the laws and the accompanying public consultations. This process is to continue, with further assistance to be provided to judicial stakeholders in drafting implementation bylaws. I would like to use this occasion to pay tribute to the leadership of Minister Popovic and her team for advancing the judicial reform to this stage, enabling a potential change which citizens are expecting. Important steps have been made both by creating an atmosphere conducive to democratic dialogue and enabling sufficient inclusiveness and transparency. Dear colleagues, we are looking forward to seeing a track record of change in the Serbian judiciary, which is to initiate with constituting of the new judicial and prosecutorial councils. The Council of Europe will continue to provide support and advice to Serbia in fostering the commitment to human rights, democracy, and the rule of law. At this opening session, I'm joined by Minister Popovic, Ambassador Joffre, and Christophe Corel, and Ambassador Ben David. It's now my great pleasure to invite Minister Popovic to take the floor.
Poštovana predsjednice Vrhovnog kasacionog suda, gospođo Vasović, poštovani direktore Generalnog direktorata za ljudska prava i vladavinu prava, gospodine Poirel, poštovani ambasadori, gospodine Giofre, Flese Kemper, Ben David i ostali ambasadori, poštovane koleginice i kolege, poštovani predstavnici medija, dame i gospodo, izuzetno mi je zadovoljstvo da danas imam priliku da se obratim ovom uvaženom skupu. Akteri smo tektonskih promjena koje se događaju u pravosuđu, a koje imaju za cilj jačanje vladavine prava i pravne sigurnosti u Republici Srbiji kroz uspostavljanje nezavisnog sudstva i samostalnog javnog tužilaštva. Izmene Ustava u oblasti pravosuđa koje su praćene donošenjem pravosudnih zakona građanima Republike Srbije doneće pravni ambijent u kome će svaki građanin brzo, lako i u razumnom roku moći da ostvari i zaštiti svoja prava pred pravosuđem koje je lišeno političkog uticaja. Takav pravni ambijent biće posljedica uspostavljanja boljeg sistema predlaganja, izbora, premeštaja i prestanka funkcije sudija, predsjednika sudova, javnih tužilaca i glavnih javnih tužilaca. Ulazak u pravosuđe biti će zasnovan na objektivnim kriterijumima vrednovanja, pravičnim procedurama izbora, otvorenosti za sve kandidate odgovarajućih kvalifikacija i transparentnosti iz ugla opšte javnosti. Da bi pozitivni efekti reforme bili ostvareni, neophodno je da Visoki savet sudstva i Visoki savet tužilaštva budu ojačani i preuzmu vodeće uloge u upravljanju pravosuđem, čime saveti dobijaju i veću odgovornost. Veća odgovornost Visokog saveta sudstva i Visokog saveta tužilaštva najmaće i veću odgovornost sudija, predsednika sudova i nosilaca javnotužilačke funkcije. Proces izrade i donošenja akta o promeni Ustava i pravosudnih zakona nije bio ni malo lak. I želim da se zahvalim svima onima koji su učestvovali u izradi akta o promeni Ustava i radnih verzija pravosudnih zakona, posebno članovima radnih grupa koji su svojim požrtvovanim radom, znanjem, ogromnom voljom i zalaganjem iznedrili odličan akt o promeni Ustava i radne tekstove pravosudnih zakona. Poseban kvalitet aktu o promeni Ustava i pravosudnim zakonima daje implementacija opšte prihvaćenih evropskih i međunarodnih standarda koji su izraženi kroz dokumenta Evropske unije, Ujedinjenih nacija, Saveta Evrope, posebno Venecijanske komisije, ali i grupe država protiv korupcije GRECO, Evropske komisije za efikasnost pravosuđa SEPEŽ, Konsultativnog veća evropskih sudija, Konsultativnog veća evropskih tužilaca i Evropske mreže Saveta pravosuđa. Danas Ministarstvo pravde i zajednički projekat Evropske unije i Saveta Evrope podrška reformi pravosuđa u Srbiji organizuju konferenciju koja je posvećena dometima usvojenog akta o promeni Ustava i pravosudnih zakona, kao i neophodnim nezakonodavnim merama koje treba da doprinesu ostvarivanju nezavisnog sudstva i samostalnog javnog tužilaštva, kako bi bili spremni za suočavanje sa izazovima koji ih očekuju u budućnosti. Održavanje ove konferencije predstavlja nastavak širokog konsultativnog procesa prezentacije i rasprave o aktu o promeni Ustava i pravosudnim zakonima koji je označen kao inkluzivan i transparentan. Ovo je još jedna prilika da upoznamo kako širu stručnu, tako i drugu zainteresovanu javnost sa rešenjima koje su sadržane u ovim propisima. Ovom prilikom moram da istaknem da je pred nama veliki rad u narednih godinu dana, veoma ozbiljan rad na izradi i donošenju više od 20 podzakonskih akata koji su neophodni za punu primjenu pravosudnih zakona. Zahvalnost za veliku podršku ovom procesu koji će omogućiti da se ojača nezavisnost sudstva i samostalnost javnog tužilaštva upućujem i predsjednici Vrhovnog kasacionog suda, gospođi Jasmini Vasović i Republičkom javnom tužiocu Zagorki Dolovac. I na kraju ću iskoristiti priliku da se zahvalim i predstavnicima Evropske unije, Saveta Evrope, OEBS-a i drugih međunarodnih organizacija, a posebno ambasadorima Žiofreu, Flesenkemperu i Bratuu, koji su dali svoj ogroman lični doprinos jačanju vladavine prava u Srbiji i podržali Ministarstvo pravde u ovom veoma važnom i složenom poslu, a koji je od izuzetnog značaja za evropske integracije Republike Srbije. U duhu svega navedenog, pozivam vas da aktivno učestvujete na današnjoj konferenciji i doprinesete unapređenju pravne kulture u Republici Srbiji i razvoju dijaloga o jednoj izuzetno značajnoj temi. Hvala.
Thank you very much, Minister. I would like to invite Emanuele Giuffre to take the floor. As you pointed out, this is happening in the context of EU Council of Europe cooperation. Emanuele, please.
Thank you very much, dear Tobias, dear Minister Popovic, dear President of the Supreme Court of Cassation, dear Ambassador Ben David, dear Annika, dear friends from the Council of Europe, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. We recently marked Serbia Statehood Day, which also celebrates the adoption of the 1835 Constitution, the so-called Sretenje Constitution, which introduced the principle of independence of the judiciary. And the reform we're discussing today is therefore a very Serbian reform, with its roots deep into the history of the rebirth of modern Serbia. These roots are the same as those of EU member states, because we belong to the same tree. The rule of law is our core value, and to protect it, we need a strong and independent judiciary. I'm therefore very pleased to be here today to mark this very important step, the adoption of the judicial laws implementing the constitutional amendments by the National Assembly last year. This is a key reform for the citizens of Serbia, which has the potential to introduce significant positive changes in the Serbian judiciary system. It was not an easy process, and I want to thank particularly Minister Popovic and her team for their leadership, for their continuous efforts, which have led to the promulgation of the constitutional reform in February last year, and a few weeks ago, the adoption of 5 implementing laws. I also would like to welcome the close consultation throughout the process with the Venice Commission and the participatory process that characterized the drafting of these laws. This represents a milestone in the effort to strengthen the rule of law in Serbia and a step forward in terms of Serbia's EU integration process, as these laws introduce important changes to strengthen independence and accountability of the judiciary. Please allow me to highlight a few core elements of the reform. Firstly, judges and prosecutors will no longer be elected by the parliament, thus reducing risks of political interference. Secondly, the legislation introduces a system of 2 rounds of 2/3 and 3/5 majority for the pre-selection of lay members to the High Judicial and Prosecutorial Councils. The 2 councils are given more autonomy over their respective budgets. Hierarchical structures in the prosecutions are being reformed. We very much welcome these steps. But of course, there is more to be done. The implementation of these laws and the adoption of the related bylaws, as the Minister just recalled, will be key to ensure the effectiveness of the constitutional amendments. Any legislation is as effective as its degree of implementation. 2 more laws are to be expected to be adopted, the law on the Judicial Academy and the law on the seats and territorial jurisdiction of courts. Furthermore, in order for the system to work smoothly, legislative changes also need to be supported by adequate staffing, budget, and communication infrastructure. And finally, as stressed by the Venice Commission, in addition to legislative changes, a change in political and legal culture in Serbia is necessary for the reforms to become tangible. The pace of Serbia's progress on the EU integration path depends also on other key elements of the so-called fundamentals, such as freedom of the media, fight against organized crime, and fight against corruption. A concrete and sustained track record should be established as a matter of priority on all these issues. Progress in Chapter 23 also depends on Serbia meeting the Greco recommendation, particularly from the 4th and 5th round of evaluation. And we look forward to continue efforts in the fight against corruption. The EU will remain at the side of Serbia, and we plan to provide 27 million budget support to the justice system, plus 3 million of complementary assistance, with several indicators of this budget support directly linked to the implementation of the constitutional law. The joint European Union Council of Europe cooperation programs remains at the disposal of the Serbian authority to support further initiatives aimed at strengthening the independence of the judiciary. No one is above the law. Rule of law is a core pillar of European integration, and we stand ready to further assist Serbia in its judicial reform. Again, today I wish to warmly congratulate all those that contributed to achieve this important step. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Emanuele. The Council of Europe Directorate General for Human Rights and Rule of Law is implementing the judicial reform project in Serbia, and it is represented here today by our Director for Human Rights, Christophe Borrell. Dear Christophe, please take the floor.
Dear Minister, dear President of the Supreme Court of Cassation, dear Deputy Chief Prosecutor, dear Ambassador, ladies and gentlemen, it's a really great pleasure for me to be with you in Belgrade today, and I must say I'm very honored to greet you at the opening of this judicial reform conference. 2023, as was already indicated, marks the 20th anniversary of Serbia's membership in the Council of Europe. And in many fields, I must say, our joint work has led to significant changes in the country, in line with European standards regarding human rights, democracy, and the rule of law. We've been working in this endeavor not only with relevant national partners, but also often with the European Union, which is our main institutional partner in political and legal terms, but also, very importantly, in financial terms. This is notably the case for the judicial reform and today's conference, which is organized under the joint progress project of the European Union and the Council of Europe called Support for the Implementation of Judicial Reform in Serbia. I must say, it's not by accident that our two organizations have been working together in this area. It is because we, both the European Union and the Council of Europe, we both consider that an independent, impartial, and efficient judiciary is key to secure a truly democratic environment where, as Ambassador Geoffrey just mentioned, the rule of law is firmly anchored. But I want also to underline that it's also very important to ensure that the rights of individuals are effectively respected, because ultimately the justice system is there to serve the interest of people and make sure that their rights are respected. I'm very grateful to the Ministry of Justice and the Serbian judiciary and to the European Union for their continued commitment and engagement in this reform during the last 2 years. As we all know, the Serbian Constitution of 2006 laid out important principles regarding the division of powers and the functioning of the judiciary. However, shortcomings on the appointment and election of the judges were identified as early as 2007 by the Venice Commission. Certain intermediate steps were subsequently undertaken to overcome those challenges, supported by the Council of Europe cooperation activities. Over the last 2 years, and I want to praise the Serbian Ministry of Justice for this achievement, we've seen the most significant changes taking place, primarily through the constitutional reform last year and later changes to the judicial legal framework. The recent adoption of the judicial laws constitute obviously an important step in the ongoing justice reform, reinforcing the rule of law and, importantly, Ambassador Geoffrey just underlined it, also contributing to Serbia's accession process to the European Union. On this path, the Council of Europe has continuously assisted the Serbian authorities, notably through the constructive dialogue which was established with the Venice Commission up to its most recent opinion of December 2022. I would also mention, like you, Minister, the recommendations that were made by our monitoring and advisory bodies. You mentioned the Group of States Against Corruption, the GRECO. You mentioned also the two consultative councils of European judges and prosecutors, the CEPEJ. All these bodies made also a contribution to this process. So we have come a long way together. But we have not yet reached the final destination. And as in any long journey, I think it's important from time to time to pause, to observe the path we've taken, but also, and above all, to check our orientation for the distance still to go. And this is exactly the purpose of this conference. It will allow us, I hope, to discuss not only what has been achieved so far in the judicial reform, but also what needs to be further addressed and put into practice. And here I would like to make two observations. I'm sorry, I'm going to repeat some of the points that were made before. The first observation I want to make is that the work carried out to align the legislative framework with European standards is fundamental, and this is, again, as I said, a great achievement. But as was also said before me, it's only the first step towards genuine change. Ultimately, as we all know, it's the implementation of the new laws and rules that will be decisive. This entails creating and sustaining an environment that secures the independence and the efficiency of the judiciary on a daily basis. I would like to highlight in this context an important point made by the Venice Commission, namely, and I quote the opinion of the Venice Commission, the legislative amendments should be accompanied by the change in the legal culture within the judiciary. A change of legal culture, but also a change of political culture. And when I mention the political culture, the political environment, I must say it's an issue not only for Serbia, it's an issue that we witness, a difficulty that we witness in many of our member states. For me, it means primarily a culture of compromise and restraint on the part of political forces in order not to interfere with the independence of the judiciary and achieve as much as possible consensus. And I would like to refer in particular to the question of the future appointment of the lay members of the High Judicial Council. I would hope that a consensus could be found among political forces for the appointment of the lay members of the Council. I have personally no doubt about Serbia's determination to bring this complex reform process to a successful end in order to ensure the Serbian judiciary's full independence, efficiency, and professionalism. This is our shared objective. So this process should continue, as you highlighted, Madam, to be conducted through an in-depth dialogue involving all relevant stakeholders so that all individuals, and that's the ultimate purpose, so that all individuals have full confidence in the independence and impartiality of the justice system. Tobias already used the same words. I'm going to repeat them. We are eager to establish a track record of positive change. And the new judicial and prosecutorial councils and the developments of these 20 bylaws and other non-legislative measures necessary for the full reform are important steps on that way. You can count on the Council of Europe's continued support in line with its mandate, including through our project team who contributed to the organization of this event. And if you allow me, I would like to thank my colleagues for their work, as well as the Serbian and foreign experts who have been working with us. With that, I trust the conference will strengthen our work together and give impetus for further progress, and I wish you all a very fruitful exchange today. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Christoph. We are also joined by Ambassador Ben David. Sweden is currently presiding over the Council of the European Union, and of course, Sweden is a founding member of the Council of Europe back in 1949. Annika.
Thank you, Tobias. Madam Minister, esteemed representatives of the Serbian judiciary, cher Emanuele, cher Monsieur Poirel, and dear Tobias. Representatives of the civil society and members of the press. It is my honor to address you, representing the Swedish presidency of the EU, and also as a long-standing donor to rule of law in Serbia. As previous speakers, I'd like to start by sharing my appreciation for today's event. Today is an important day, and this is an important gathering. Today is an opportunity to recognize and to take stock of a massive reform effort. Your hard work sets the scene for promoting the rule of law in Serbia, a core interest for the Council of Europe and for the European Union further. And thanks to the hard work and dedication of many present in the room today and under the leadership of Minister Popovic, Serbian rule of law now has the opportunity to evolve into an empowering environment navigated by an independent judiciary and autonomous prosecution as one of its core values. A big and important step has been taken. Ahead lies, of course, the implementation of the new laws that will prove their worth. Safeguarding European Union fundamental values, including the rule of law, democracy, and human rights, and stopping organized crime and corruption, are one of the 4 priorities of Sweden's presidency of the European Council. For over 2 decades, Sweden has provided strategic, predictable and long-term support to Serbia's reforms necessary on its EU path. A day like this, when we acknowledge the culmination of a great effort, I am pleased to see Sweden's contributions over many years bear fruit in these very concrete terms. We all know that EU integration is a demanding process, since it is about all-encompassing structural and societal change. It goes beyond fulfilling chapters of the EU acquis, developing laws and reforming institutions. It goes to the very heart of state and society. The ultimate goal, of course, is to establish robust governance and democratic practices that allow for adequate and democratic execution of state functions, such as security, access to justice, protection of human rights, public service delivery, economic performance, and the creation of jobs. Because the EU is not only a political union, it is, as we have heard, a community of values that rests on the rule of law and respect for the fundamental rights and freedoms of the individuals. The quality and character of your lawmaking process that has given practical effect to the constitutional amendments are indeed important markers for democracy, for Serbian democracy. What you have achieved and what lies ahead is not only about adopting new laws and policies, it is about social dialogue, societal dialogue, participation, inclusiveness, and transparency. At the end of the day, it is about setting off the Serbian judicial system to a good start for the future efficiency in upholding human rights for all, everywhere, and all the time. A reassessment of the overall principles of any legal culture does take time, but it needs to be steady and continued. And I wish you steadfast commitment and dedication in the hard work ahead. For Sweden and for the EU, the fundamentals are there. They apply on the path towards an EU membership. The benchmarks are before our eyes. Democracy, human rights, and the rule of law will remain pillars of Swedish engagement in Serbia, in the Western Balkans, and we look forward to a continued partnership with Serbia in addressing important challenges in these areas. Thank you very much.
Dear colleague, it is a great pleasure to announce now, of course, the key stakeholders of this reform. To address us with keynote addresses, first is the President of the Supreme Court of Cassation, Judge Jasmina Vazovic. Jasmina Vazovic, the floor is yours.
Poštovani domaćini, uvaženi gosti, učesnici skupa. Zakon o uređenju sudova, Zakon o Visokom savetu sudstva i Zakon o sudijama predstavljaju i osnov i okvir ostvarenja Ustavom garantovane nezavisnosti sudske vlasti. Dana 9. februara ove godine Narodna skupština je na predlog Ministarstva pravde usvojila set novih pravosudnih zakona kojima je sudska vlast dobila ne jedini, ali značajan osnov za jačanje svoje nezavisnosti. Time je okončan jedan dugotrajan proces i za izvršnu vlast kao predlagača zakona i za zakonodavnu vlast koja je zakone usvojila. Kada je reč o sudskoj vlasti, čiji su predstavnici aktivno učestvovali i u dosadašnjem procesu, ona tek sada dobija glavnu ulogu. Implementacija i primjena ustavnih promjena i procesnih zakona od ključnog je značaja za dalje jačanje nezavisnosti sudske grane vlasti. Sudije su te koje zakone primenjuju i koji se o zakonitosti staraju. Stoga bih ovom prilikom podsjetila nosioce sudske vlasti da ovlašćenje i poverenje koje smo dobili usvajanjem ovih zakona nose sa sobom ogroman teret odgovornosti. Mi ćemo u buduće biti ti koji su odgovorni za izbor nosilaca sudske vlasti, za njihovo znanje, posvećenost, integritet, ponašanje i dostojnost. Od nas najviše zavisi obezbeđenje nezavisnosti sudske vlasti i jačanje poverenja u sudsku vlast. I ako budemo istrajni i dosledni u tome, usvojene ustavne promene i novi pravosudni zakoni ostvarit će svoju svrhu.
Thank you very much, President Vazovic. Deputy Prosecutor Stamenkovic, please take the floor.
Uvažene predsjednice Vrhovnog kasacionog suda, ministre pravde, ambasadore delegacije Europske unije u Srbiji, šefe kancelarije Saveta Evrope u Srbiji, direktore Direktorata za ljudska prava i vladavinu prava Saveta Evrope, ambasadore Švedske, poštovane kolege, javni tužioci i glavni javni tužioci, poštovane sudije. Želim da vas pozdravim u ime još uvek Republičkog javnog tužilaštva, uskoro Vrhovnog tužilaštva Republike Srbije, Vrhovnog javnog tužilaštva Republike Srbije, kao ime Republičkog javnog tužioca gospođe Dolovac, svoje lično ime i svih kolega i koleginice iz javnih tužilaštva u našoj zemlji. Na današnjoj konferenciji o reformi pravosuđa, koja ima svoju posebnu važnost imajući u vidu nedavno usvajanje pravosudnih zakona, a među njima i novog zakona o javnom tužilaštvu i zakona o Visokom savetu tužilaštva. Usvajanje pravosudnih, a među njima i tužilačkih zakona, predstavlja veliki korak u reformi pravosuđa kojim se dodatno konkretizuju odredbe i principi Ustava Republike Srbije, kojim je za cilj jačanje nezavisnosti sudova i samostalnosti, što je još bitnije, javnih tužilaštava i time postavljanje temelja i uslova za efikasniji, kvalitetniji, transparentniji i odgovorniji rad pravosudnih organa u zaštiti javnog interesa kao i interesa građana Republike Srbije. Smatram da je posebno važno istaći da su ovi zakoni usvojeni u roku od godinu dana od stupanja na snagu akta o promeni Ustava Republike Srbije, odnosno u roku predviđenim Ustavnim zakonom, što govori o velikoj posvećenosti reformi pravosuđa svih koji su u njoj učestvovali, počev od Ministarstva pravde i članova radnih grupa, zatim Vlade Republike Srbije i Narodne skupštine, kao i stručne i opšte javnosti koja je imala priliku da aktivno učestvuje u javnim predstavljanjima nacrta zakona. Zahvalnost za ovako efikasno postupanje svakako dugujemo i Savetu Evrope i Evropskoj uniji, koji su svojim podrškom i ekspertizom doprineli posvećenom radu na izradi i predstavljanju nacrta zakona i nadamo se da će ova podrška i saradnja se nastaviti u periodu koji je pred nama, u kome nas očekuje izuzetno važan zadatak izrade novih podzakonskih akata u skladu sa odredbama novog zakona o javnom tužilaštvu i zakona o Visokom savetu sudstva, posebno akata koji se naravno tiču javno-tužilačkog sistema. Reforma pravosuđa je od izuzetnog značaja za dalji napredak našeg društva, s obzirom da je usko povezana sa pravnom sigurnošću, vladavinom prava, a time i razvojem investicija i ekonomskim razvojem u našoj zemlji, koji nam je preko potreban. Ona je takođe od velikog značaja u procesu pristupanja Republike Srbije Evropskoj uniji, s obzirom da poglavlje 23 predstavlja jedno od ključnih poglavlja u procesu pristupanja naše zemlje Evropskoj uniji i da je vladavina prava jedna od najvažnijih tekovina, što je više puta do sada podvučeno od prethodnih govornika, kako Evropske unije, tako i Saveta Evrope. Reforma pravosuđa u Republici Srbije pre svega od najneposrednijeg značaja za položaj, organizaciju i kvalitet rada srpskih pravosudnih organa, time i javnih tužilaštava, jer kroz zakonska rešenja transponuje ustavne principe i precizira ustavne odredbe, čime se pravosudnim organima, uključujući javno tužilaštvo, omogućava vršenje svojih ustavnih ovlašćenja. Javno tužilaštvo je sa pažnjom pratilo i učestvovalo u radu radnih grupa osnovanih od strane Ministarstva pravde koje su radile na izradi prvih radnih tekstova pravosudnih zakona, sledeći vrlo intenzivnu dinamiku sastanaka i omogućavajući razmenu i sučeljavanje stručnih mišljenja, u nameri da se dođe do održivih zakonskih rešenja za svaki pojedinačni institut prava i odredbu zakona o kojima ćemo imati prilike danas da razgovaramo nešto kasnije. Drago nam je što su pravosudni zakoni usvojeni u roku, ali moramo biti svesni da se pravosudna reforma ne završava izradom normativnih akata. Na svima nama je odgovornost da ovu reformu najbolje moguće sprovedemo u praksi, u skladu sa Ustavom i pravosudnim zakonima, kao i najboljim međunarodnim i domaćim standardima i iskustvima, kako se ne bi samo na rečima, već i delom ostvarili ciljevi ove reforme, propisani strategijom razvoja pravosuđa za period od 2020. do 2025. godine. Nadamo se da će se novim zakonskim rešenjima o obaveštavanju javnosti sva javna tužilaštva u svojim predmetima uspešnije komunicirati kako sa našim građanima, tako i sa stručnom javnošću, kako bi se na pravi način predstavili naši uspesi i izazovi u radu, koji su često poznati u inostranstvu i više cenjeni od strane respektabilnih međunarodnih organizacija, kao što je, na primjer, Eurojust, nego naših građana. Takođe, izuzetno bitnim smatram potrebu da se obezbedi kontinuitet u radu pravosuđa, te da se pospeši i odgovarajućim budžetskim sredstvima, što je još bitnije, podrži efikasan, kvalitetan, odgovoran i transparentan rad javnog tužilaštva i Visokog saveta tužilaštva, uz razumevanje da su za uspehe u radu potrebni adekvatni ljudski, materijalni i finansijski resursi. Poštovane kolege i učesnici ovog skupa, Republičko javno tužilaštvo, to jest Visoko javno tužilaštvo Srbije, Vrhovno javno tužilaštvo Srbije, pozdravlja blagovremeno usvajanje novih pravosudnih zakona i uzeće aktivno učešće u njihovom sprovođenju, uključujući izradu podzakonskih akata i preduzimanje svih potrebnih organizacijnih mera da se reforma pravosuđa adekvatno sprovede u praksi, kako bi se omogućilo postupanje javnog tužilaštva na efikasan način u cilju ostvarivanja njegove osnovne i Ustavom propisane uloge u vidu krivično-pravne zaštite našeg društva, odnosno zaštite javnog interesa i građana naše zemlje. Međutim, i time ću završiti, reforma pravosuđa predstavlja zajedničko delo svih nas i zato je naša odgovornost u ovom vremenu izuzetno značajna, čega svi moramo biti svesni. Hvala vam.
Thank you very much, Mr. Stamenkovic. Esteemed conference participants, this concludes our opening session. After a short break, there will be 2 thematic sessions with panel discussions, and I really invite you to use the time and space. Both issues are extremely important, and they will also help us to identify the way ahead and to identify how we can actually make meaningful contributions to a change of judicial and political culture and what is next on the reform agenda. Thank you very much once again for attending this opening session of the Judicial Reform Conference, and see you after the break.